Welcome to part 9 of the Firmament series. This is where we're going to tackle the Tabernacle and the firmament and see some similarities there, and talk about how that relates to creation itself. So the Tabernacle and creation. So remember back to all those verses that we went through in the first 8 sessions, likening either the creation of the world to the tabernacle or specifically referencing the firmament in regards to the tabernacle. So we'll discover how the firmament is equivalent to the veil between heaven and earth, and how the tabernacle is a replica of creation of God's original tent. So we're going to start with a writing from one of the early rabbis, and this is from Bamidbar Rabbah 12, and this is regarding the tabernacle. He says, another matter, et hamishkan, that means the tabernacle, as it is equal to the rest of the world, which is called a tent, just as the tabernacle is called a tent. How so? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Genesis 1:1. And it is written, he spreads the heavens like a sheet, in Psalm 104:2. So regarding the tabernacle, it is written, you shall make sheets of goat's hair as a tent over the tabernacle, in Exodus 26:7. On the second it is written, let there be a firmament, and let it divide, from Genesis 1:6. Now regarding the tabernacle, it is written, the curtain shall divide for you, in Exodus 26:33. On the third, let the water under the heavens be gathered to one place, Genesis 1:9. And regarding the tabernacle, you shall craft a basin of bronze and its base of bronze for washing, Exodus 30:18. On the fourth, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens, Genesis 1:14. And in the tabernacle you shall craft a candelabrum of pure gold, Exodus 25:31. On the fifth, let birds fly over the earth, Genesis 1:20. In the tabernacle, the cherubs shall be spreaders of wings, in Exodus 25:20. On the sixth, man was created. In the tabernacle, you draw Aaron your brother near to you, Exodus 28:1. On the seventh, the heavens were completed, Genesis 2:1. In the tabernacle, all the work of the tabernacle was completed, in Exodus 39:32. And in the creation of the world it is written, God blessed, in Genesis 2:3. And in the tabernacle he blessed them, Exodus 39:43. On the seventh God completed, Genesis 2:2. And in the tabernacle it was on that day that Moses concluded. And on the seventh, and sanctified it, in Genesis 2:3, and in the tabernacle and sanctified it, in Numbers 7:1. So you see that representation of kind of how the creation account in Genesis lines up with the creation of the tabernacle and how it was built. So let's look at this tabernacle a little bit closer. So the tabernacle is almost always depicted in rectangular format. No one fully agrees on what it looked like despite detailed instructions given to Moses on Mount Sinai. So you'll see things like this. And you'll see things like this. Kind of rectangular. You see a bunch of different stuff like this. But several years ago, an engineer named Andy Hoy saw that pi 3.14 was hidden throughout the instructions and decided to apply this knowledge in creating a new version or a new vision of the tabernacle. So he discovered that the only way that made sense to him to follow the instructions precisely without adding or subtracting anything from the supplies, following the text to the T, making it structurally sound, having an ergonomic design, that it can withstand all different types of weather, being able to be assembled and disassembled with relative ease because they had to move it around, to follow the cleanliness laws to the T for just practicality of it, etc. So all these different things, it would look like the following: a domed tent, like this. And you say, that's crazy. But I encourage you, get the book, The House of El Shaddai. I'm telling you, it was like the most fun reading I've ever done in my life. He literally takes the rectangular tabernacle and literally breaks down each verse that gives the instructions on what to do, how much material they were allotted, and he says, well, this is where this is wrong. They're not doing it correctly, or this would have no ability to withstand anything. It would be like a house of cards, and he goes through all of this different stuff using all biblical references, explaining everything very very drawn out and very well about how this is the way to do it and how it makes sense. And just think about those like old circus tents. How easily those giant dome tents that they put up. It's not difficult, but the way that they with the rectangular tabernacle just is it it the more he explains things in his book, it just doesn't line up. But the picture to the right just kind of gives you an example of how where pi is located in just talking about the circular courtyard sheet layout. Then you start thinking about all of those verses about the circle of the earth and looking down on the circle and the chug, the hug, the chug, that word that we examined earlier. And then you start putting together these verses where he's like, he spread the tent out over the circle of the earth. And then you're thinking, interesting. The tabernacle is spreading a tent over the circle of the earth. And then, looking at what that Bamidbar Rabbah 12 talked about how creation lines up with the tabernacle. And then you're like, well, is this? What does Peter say that God's original tabernacle was? His creation. But we separated ourselves from that. And then so he creates this tabernacle made of the hands of man for a temporary dwelling where he can connect with us. And this just foreshadows the future. And that's why the tearing of the veil and then being able to enter the Holy of Holies to God's presence. So it's not only it's a model recreation of creation, and it's also symbolic too. And that's how God works. It's like he, things are on multiple layers with him. It has a face value, but it also has a deeper message too. And if Jesus is the Word and the Word is God and was God, and God himself is infinitely complex, well, his word is going to be infinitely complex, especially when you consider the original language of Hebrew. Let's continue. Yahweh told Moses in Exodus 25:40, he says, be sure that you make everything according to the pattern I have shown you here on the mountain. So that means that it was not up for debate. He had a specific way for it to be done, and that's how it needed done. It is important to get Yahweh's instructions correct. He has very specific instructions on how to make it and what to do with it. So all the Google images that you see, I've done it. You select it, and they're not fully in line with the text. They're all different. I mean, you have a general understanding of things, but there's a lot of assumptions made with those constructions. So Andy Hoy makes the perfect connections to the heavens being spread out like a curtain to a dome shape of the tabernacle. And then you have God Almighty, or El Shaddai, so that's whose house it is. He has the gematria value of 314, or pi. It just makes sense. Like, wouldn't the everlasting God that has no beginning and no end be associated with a circle? And that's why you see circles, and I brought that up a few sessions ago. You see circles all throughout creation of everything. Circles and spirals. A lot of circles and spirals in just like nature. So it sounds appropriate. Sounds like something he would do. Now you say, well, how are we only discovering what the tabernacle look like now? Like, how would the true form of the tabernacle ever be lost? How does this make sense? Well, there's a lot of things that are lost. Like, we don't even know how to pronounce Yod He Vav He or Yahweh. I mean, I usually say Yahweh, but I mean, there's a great case for Yahuwah. That's how you pronounce it, is Yahuwah. So it's like they just stopped saying it, and then now we don't know what it is. They were so afraid to use God's name in vain that now we don't exactly know what the proper way to pronounce Yod He Vav He or Yahweh. I could be saying it wrong. It could be Yahuwah instead. Jehovah. I mean, it's definitely not Jehovah because that's the Germanized version of it. But there's multiple different ways it could be pronounced, or maybe even a way we don't know because we don't have any vowels to work with. But they stopped building they stopped the tabernacle in the wilderness with the tent, and then they made it into a brick and mortar place. And we don't know exactly what that looked like. It was destroyed, but we have to look back at what was the original tabernacle in the wilderness. That's what had Yahweh's specific instructions. It wasn't a brick and mortar building. It was made with, it was a tent. It was a literal tent that they had to put up. And then let's look at Jeremiah 16:19. It says, O Lord, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the day of affliction. The Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and the things wherein there is no profit. So all it takes is a generation or two to lose out on what the true instructions were for the tabernacle. And maybe they're written down somewhere on the tablets. I don't know. We don't know where the ark is. There's some speculation it's in Ethiopia, but we don't know that for sure. We'll actually bring that back up again in another session or two. But so it can easily be lost. We don't know what it looks like. We just think we do. That we take the text and we make assumptions based on the text, and then you end up with this structure that has like all these curtains overlapping on top of each other, and it's like, what's the purpose of that? All that is going to cause mold, and that the mold was, was a no-no in the kosher laws. You're going to have like leather stacked on top of this, goat skin and on top of this. And it's like, that's just going to trap moisture in there. Like it doesn't make sense. And you don't think about that until this, Andy Hoy breaks it down. I mean, I cannot recommend that book to you enough. The House of El Shaddai. It is such a cool read. Even if at the end of it, you disagree with it, which he makes a really good case. But it's, entertain the thought. Don't take the status quo of things. Look at other possibilities. And if the tabernacle truly needs to be reconsidered from its rectangular format, that's what's proposed by Andy Hoy, does our view of creation need to be changed as well? Does this tabernacle model our entire cosmology? That would be a question. What about this pillar of cloud and fire that we see in the wilderness? God's presence in the wilderness was represented by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now, again, I didn't put this on there, but the word pillar means like a column, like a tube. And where was that coming from? It was coming from heaven. A pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Let's look at some of the verses here. Exodus 13:21-22. The presence of the Lord was going before them by day in a pillar or a column of cloud to lead them along the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, so that they could travel by day and night. He did not withdraw the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from going before the people. Exodus 14:19. The angel of God, who had been going in front of the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. The pillar of the cloud moved from in front and stood behind them. Exodus 14:24. So it happened at the early morning watch before dawn that the Lord looked down on the army of the Egyptians, you have that up-down relationship there, through the pillar of fire and cloud and put them in a state of confusion. So where's that coming down from? It's coming down from the sky, because the Lord is looking down from that, and he's located directionally up. Exodus 33:9-10. Whenever Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend. Descend from where? Descend from where? Would descend and stand at the doorway of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. When all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the tent door, all the people would rise and worship, each at his tent door. These are people with tents. The tabernacle is not going to be this, like building a house. It's, they're tent nomadic people in the wilderness, so their tabernacle is going to be a tent as well. Deuteronomy 31:15. Then the Lord appeared in the tent in a pillar of cloud, and the pillar of cloud stood behind the doorway of the tent. Nehemiah 9:12. And with a pillar of cloud you led them by day, and with a pillar of fire by night to light the way for them in which they were to go. Nehemiah 9:19. You in your great mercy and compassion did not abandon them in the wilderness. The pillar of the cloud did not leave them by day to lead them in the way, nor the pillar of fire by night to light for them the way they should go. Psalm 99:7. He spoke to them in the pillar of cloud. They kept his testimonies and the statutes that he gave them. So if this represented Yahweh's presence, where was this column going up to? Did it stop mid-sky? Did it go to outer space? Okay, this is kind of like that Jesus ascension problem and the Jacob's ladder problem. It's like, where was this thing going? Or was it a direct conduit to Yahweh himself in his abode in the third heaven on his throne right above the firmament? You picture the two cups on a string type of a thing. Like, was this God's, lifeline or conduit from the heavenly holy of holies to the earthly holy of holies? Because that's where God's presence is. It's almost like it's like a giant fireman's pole that it slid down there. Something to think about. You think about a pillar of fire, and then it's like, well, where's it going up to? Is it just stopping right when it hits the clouds? Is it going into the outer space? And then, like, if it's God's presence, wouldn't it be connected to him? So is it shooting across 14 billion light years of outer space? Or is it going up to his abode, which is directionally up and which is more intimate to earth than we think it is? So I was just having some fun for my first time ever trying to do artificial intelligence, AI. So I just asked it to create a couple images here. I don't think these are accurate representations of the tabernacle, but I kind of like the pictures of like the pillar of cloud and then the pillar of fire. It's kind of pretty cool, like to think about that. When you look at the recreated images of those on Google, the artist rendition, it just it goes up to the edge of the picture, and it's like you never see exactly where is that going to. No one ever, they just draw it going up as far as their picture is, the edge of their picture. It's like, where's it going to? Let's look at the Tabernacle and New Jerusalem. So I was having this discussion with a couple people somewhat recently and just found it interesting that Revelation 21 speaks of the new city, New Jerusalem, being equal length, depth, and height. So for all of my life, I said, oh, it's a cube. It's like, okay, if our earth is like a globe now, why would the new heavens and earth be a cube? You know what I mean? Type of thing. So it's like, but, when I really think about it, there's actually several different shapes that could meet that specification. So I kind of just drew these really quick on graph paper, but you do have the cube. So you have here the, the top view looking down on top of the cube, and then the side view. They're all equal parts there. So you have, either one of these shapes are possible with those dimensions here. You have a cube. The second one you have is a pyramid. So like the top, just think of it, you're looking down the Great Pyramid of Giza, looks like this. And then from the side, it looks like this. So you have equal length, width, and height of the object. And then you have a hemi-ellipsoid. You have you still have a square base, okay? But then it starts to dome out. I couldn't really draw this well by myself, but then from each of those kind of corners, it goes into a dome shape, and then you get this little gumdrop looking thing, this hemi-ellipsoid. It is the same height at its zenith, and then it has the same width and depth. And then you get those scriptures of like four corners of the earth, and then you get stuff that say like foundation, because this is the foundation is what measures, is like that's laid out. It says laid out like a square. The foundation of it is laid out like a square, but it doesn't say anything about the kind of the top half of it. But it does say that it has equal length, depth, and height. But that could be, like I said, either one of these could be true. So it's just interesting to think about that. And it's like, well, one of my family members says, well, if New Jerusalem is a cube, then why would the tabernacle be a dome shape? And I said, oh, that's interesting. But technically, if the zenith point of the dome could be your equal height as the depth and width, I just thought it was a cool way to think about that. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But it's just, these are all possibilities based on the text. Just taking it based on the text. And that hemiellipsoid seems to line up with a lot of scripture. I mean, just when you think about it, it has the you have the firmament or the dome that is a lot of the translations, the arch of the sky. You have the bowed heavens, the stretched out like tent curtains. You have four corners. You have a point where this dome meets the earth, or meets the rest of it, like the earth shape. It's like, it seems to, like, if you just took things literally, you could end up with that. That's just like, if you take things literally, it's kind of cool to think about. So that tabernacle would be a hemiellipsoid. The tabernacle in the wilderness would be that. So, all right, let's continue talking about the tabernacle. Let's get into some scripture. Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 and 2. Now the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched and not man. Oh, the true tabernacle. Interesting. Which tabernacle did the Lord pitch? His heavenly abode, supported by the firmament, in which his connection with his creation was severed at the fall of man. So earth was his original tabernacle. Hebrews 8:5. They serve as pattern and foreshadowing of what has its true existence and reality in the heavenly things in the sanctuary. So let's just stop right there for a second. They serve as a pattern and foreshadowing on what its true existence and reality is. The true existence. So the tabernacle is a pattern of true existence. So for when Moses was about to erect the tabernacle, he was warned by God saying, see that you make it all exactly according to the pattern which was shown to you on the mountain. And he's quoting, Exodus 25:40 there. He says, do it like I showed you and not any other way. Now they ended up doing it another way once they built it brick and mortar, because they're not using the tools. He didn't have them use brick and mortar to do that. They used poles and hooks and curtains. So, they were all, oh, look at this beautiful, temple that we built. And it's like, that's not the tabernacle. That's not the way God told you to do it. That's not those weren't his instructions. So we can't base what the wilderness tabernacle is based on what the tabernacle was in Jerusalem, or the temple. So the tabernacle is creation. So we have to start rethinking certain things based on this text. Like, I'm not making this up. Like, just, this is what the text says. The tabernacle, Hebrews 8:13. In that he saith, a new covenant, he hath made the first one. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. So the old covenant is earth, like decayed and groaning to be redeemed, like we see in Romans 8:22. It says, for we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. It's tainted by sin, it needs destroyed, and a new one needs built. So the new covenant will be the new Jerusalem when the old heavens and earth pass away, and God creates a new heaven and a new earth. Revelation 21, 2 and 3. Okay, Hebrews 29 says, Then he said, Lo, I come to do thy will, O God. He taketh away the first, that he may establish the second. Original creation was the perfect tabernacle between men and God, and then Adam sinned and fractured this. Now, I would say that, like I mentioned in the previous video, that it was created with the foreknowledge, obviously, that men would sin, because it was created with division, and the new one will be created with unity. But moving on, this is the firmament served as the dividing barrier between men and God, okay, between the heavenly realm and the earthly realm. And the tabernacle was created as an earthly substitute for God to tabernacle with his people. So once we blew it, he says, okay, make this thing. This is my little, my little model of creation, and I'm going to meet you in the Holy of Holies, because that's the only way we can kind of like a little cheat code of where I can still be with you. And then Jesus, Yeshua, became the mediator between God and man at his death and resurrection. He tore the veil and symbolically tore the firmament between heaven and earth at his crucifixion and death and resurrection. Jesus will again tear open the firmament to come back to earth to reign for 1,000 years. He's going to tear that thing open, as we saw in Revelation and amongst a bunch of other verses. And after he crushes the final rebellion at the end of the 1,000 years, the old covenant, which is sin-tainted heaven and earth, will be destroyed. And a new heaven and new earth will be a reflection of the perfect tabernacle of God in relationship with his people. I hope that makes sense for you. So let's talk more about the veil and the firmament more specifically. So Exodus chapter 26 verses 31 and 35. And you shall make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet yarns and fine twined linen. It shall be made with cherubim skillfully worked into it. And you shall hang it on 4 pillars of acacia overlaid with gold, with hooks of gold, on 4 bases of silver. And then you shall hang the veil from the clasps, and bring the ark of the testimony in there within the veil. And the veil shall separate for you the holy place from the most holy. You shall put the mercy seat on the ark of the testimony in the most holy place. And you shall set the table outside the veil, and the lampstand on the south side of the tabernacle opposite the table, and you shall put the table on the north side. So Exodus 36:8 says, The skilled men among them who were doing the work on the tabernacle made 10 curtains of fine twisted linen and blue and purple and scarlet fabric, with cherubim worked into them. The work of an embroiderer, Bezalel, made them. And then Hebrews 9:3 says, And after the second veil was the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all. So right here you have very skilled people to build these cherubim into those curtains. So they're what separate the Ark of the Covenant, or the mercy seat, in the Holy of Holies from the rest of the tabernacle. So this second veil is what separates the most holy place from everything else. And what you could say is that's heaven. You're separating heaven and earth, because you're separating the abode of God, or where God's presence is, from the rest of the tabernacle, meaning you're separating that from the rest of creation. So let's just do a side-by-side comparison of like the holy place and the Holy of Holies and the firmament. So the holy place in the tabernacle was the model barrier between God and man. Because remember that the tabernacle in the wilderness is just a model of things, and the firmament is the barrier between God and man on earth creation. The veil was decorated with gold shining cherubim. Okay, and remember we could say that those could be stars too, right? And then the firmament is decorated with shining stars, but also in Ezekiel we see that there's cherubim right on the firmament and around the firmament. They're right underneath it. And only the highest priests could enter under certain conditions once a year, okay, or only the high priest. And then Jesus, as we hear in Hebrews, is the high priest, our sympathetic high priest, was the first man to actually ascend through the firmament into heaven to pave the way. It says he had to ascend first. Those are the verses that we read. He had to be the first one through. He was that high priest, and once a year, that was their representation. That foreshadowing is what the writer of Hebrews says of things to come. Then in the holy place, you have the table of showbread. And what did we learn in Exodus? That manna came from heaven. It didn't. So where did it show up? It came. It showed up on the ground, and like when the dew kind of like evaporated, and then the manna was left there. And it's like, well, where does the dew come from? Well, there's been a lot of scriptures that say that somehow it seems like the weather is influenced by the windows in heaven. So manna came from heaven, and how we know, even though it showed up on the ground, it had to have been affected by something in heaven, because the table of showbread is in the holy place. If the tabernacle is a representation or a recreation of creation, then manna had to physically come from heaven somehow. Does that make sense? Then you have the veil was held up by pillars, and then the firmament supports the heaven like pillars. That's kind of what we can gather from the rest of Scripture there. Past the veil is the mercy seat, and past the firmament is God's throne. So there's the veil firmament parallels there. So the veil is blue, purple, and red, and the sky is blue, and it's also noted to be red in Revelation, and reference to, and this could be a reference to a mixture of fire and water utilized to create it, so that Shamayim is like they said, the early rabbis said it was an acronym. It means fire and water, what was created to make the firmament, those two elements. The veil in the tabernacle was meticulously crafted with a needle by skilled workers, skilled embroiderers, and God had to empower them as well to do this. And then what do we see? The firmament is, it's like the psalmist says, is in the firmament declares your handiwork. Like this, it's the firmament was meticulously crafted by God's hand. How many times does he say, I spread out the sky with my hand? It was my hand that did it. And then we go back and look at what waters is. It's mem, yod, mem in the Hebrew, and that means water, hand, water. And then you get God spreading, dividing the waters with his hand, creating the expanse by way of the rakia, the firmament. We see the menorah are the lights in the holy place, and then you have stars and luminaries in the lights in the sky, or in that second heaven, you could say. And then you have the altar of incense, and then the smoke or the scents fly upward towards heaven for God to enjoy. So like, for instance, after Noah gets off the ark, he makes a sacrifice to the Lord, and it said it was a sweet aroma to him. So where does the smoke go? Up. And God can smell it. he enjoyed the scent, the altar of incense. And then you have the veil in the tabernacle torn after crucifixion, and then also torn at I could say it's torn at the baptism, because you have the schizo, the opening, and then the dove coming down, but definitely at his second coming for sure, 100%. The tabernacle and creation. So we're going to look a little bit more into that. I probably should have put this slides back at the beginning, but that's okay. So the tabernacle can also be viewed as a representation of the layout of earth and heaven, with the outer court down here representing the like earth, the arets, and then the holy place representing the heavens, part of the heavens, which the stars abide, manna came from, and the veil. And then you have the veil right here, and that separates the Holy of Holies from everything else. And then you have the Ark of the Covenant, and that's the represents the God's presence, or the throne of God. And although this is in a rectangular format, even though that's, we said we have to consider challenging the rectangular format of the tabernacle, it still gets the idea of cross. And this kind of shows you that, like, kind of what I'm talking about, those layers, right? You have, if you think about someone standing like someone standing right here. This is like on earth, and then you have to go up to get to heaven. And if you're an angel, this is your wings here. If you're an angel, you have to come down. So this is, all this up-down relationship. What I'm saying is, like, you can't get there by going this way. Can't get there by going this way. This is down in the Sheol. You have to go up to get to heaven. So the colors of the veil. Okay, so you have blue here, and that represents, some of this is my interpretation here. So, this is just me kind of doing some of my synthesis. So, blue is the sapphire color of the firmament and the waters above, and it represents divinity and a heavenly connection. And the firmament is what connects heaven to earth. You have the scarlet that represents blood and sacrifice, atonement, redemption, and we also see the firmament mixed with fire in Revelation 15:2. Now, what that exactly means, I don't know, but it took the blood of Jesus to get through that firmament as well. And then you have purple that represents royalty and kingship, and that is a mixture of blue and red, and which is fire and water, Aish Ma'im, used to form the firmament. Blue is water, scarlet blood, and the veil. The entrance to that spirit realm there. And remember, the spirit realm doesn't mean it's interdimensional. It's just God is spirit, and that's where his realm. That's where his realm is. And then 1 John chapter 5 verse 6 through 8 says, "This is he that came by water and blood, even Jesus Christ, not by water only, but by water and blood. And it is the Spirit that beareth witness, because the Spirit is truth. For there are three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost." So the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. "And these three are one. And there are three that bear witness in earth, the Spirit, and the water, and the blood. And these three agree in one." So also remember at the crucifixion, when Jesus gave up his spirit and his side was pierced, he had water and blood that came out. And those are the three. Jesus' spirit left, and what else left his body? Water and blood. So those are three in agreement, that he came by water and blood. So the tearing of the veil and the firmament. So Matthew 27 verses 50 and 51. "Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost," or his spirit, "and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent." And we also see this in Luke 23, chapter 23 verses 44 and 45, and then Mark 15, Mark chapter 15 verse 38. And then Hebrews chapter 9, verses 11 and 12, it says, "But when Christ appeared as the high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption." So the writer of Hebrews understands that the tabernacle is creation. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 19 and 20. "Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, which he hath consecrated for us, through the veil, that is to say, his flesh." It is all about Jesus Christ, Yeshua, dying for us so that we could cross that barrier, both spiritually and physically, to be with the Father. John 14:6. "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody can go to the Father except through Yeshua." So God raised him up. Yahweh raised him up. He says he's going to exalt me in John. He talks about, Yahweh chose to exalt the Son above himself, make it all about him. But if we want to spend forever with Yeshua and be in Yahweh's presence, that's why he's so important. And this is the symbolic way, like the physicality of that, crossing the barrier to be with to be with God in heaven. So if the veil represents the firmament, then both of these structures are the dividing point between man and God. And I know we've kind of been beating that point home. So Jesus creates the tearing of the structure to allow direct access to the throne. So this may also attest to the colors of the veil, because Jesus' blood is what tore the blue firmament, and the mixing of blood red and sapphire blue is what makes purple. The Hebrew word used for the veil is paroketh. That's Strong's 6532. This cultural and historical background per Strong's Concordance includes the veil represents the boundary between the divine and human realms. So it's not just me making this up through my own just kind of dreams and aspirations of this thing, but that's what's understood with the Hebrew word. The Greek equivalent for veil is katapetsasm or something like that, but the Strong's 2665, it has the base word katapetome, which means to spread out. So the veil is a curtain. And you get a lot of contrasting with many verses which speak of God spreading out the heavens or sky like a tent or curtain. And this is the same word used for the veil being torn in Matthew and the sky being torn at Jesus' baptism. They use the same word. So it likens the veil and the veil being torn and the sky being torn at Jesus' baptism. That's why I kind of included that, saying like, hey, this could have been also a tearing of the firmament as well. Okay, let's look at the word rakia in Hebrew. So these are the what you see there is the more modern Hebrew, but the Hebrew is the language of Yahweh. So that's his language. So if Yahweh is infinite and complex, then his language should be deep, expansive, and multi-layered. Now, there's not a lot of quote-unquote words in the Hebrew language. Like, there's a lot other languages that have more words, but the Hebrew is very deep because it has numbers associated with it. It has different sounds. It has pictures associated with it, and then you have meaning kind of sandwiched upon meaning between the different words. So the word is compromised. The word rakia is compromised by resh, kof, yod, and ayin, and that's when going from right to left. So this is the resh, kof, the little yod up here, and then the ayin. And then I just kind of just said this. Each Hebrew letter has a sound, a meaning of its own, a number value, and a picture associated with it. So let's start with the first letter of rakia. It's resh. So what we want to look at here is not so much the modern Hebrew, but we want to look at the early Hebrew kind of pictograms that are associated with this. So this is what you see with resh here. Then resh means the top, most important, or chief. And the picture is like a head, like a person's head. Kof. Kof means like sun on the horizon, a light circle behind, like behind somebody, like it looks like kind of like a back of a head, and time. So again, the early Hebrew, this is what you see here. You see kind of like the sun on the horizon here. It looks like the back of somebody's head, especially in the more modern Hebrew. You kind of get the horizon picture there with the sun and the line and things like that. And since it's associated with the sun, then that's where you get like time. It's associated with that as well. And its picture is sun on the horizon, and also was referenced to as a needle and thread. So you kind of see that too, like the thread and then the needle there. Yod. It's the third letter in rakia. Yod means a hand, a work or creation, a finished work, an action, worship, or like right, like a direction, right. So Yod's picture is an arm or a hand. So it is the smallest letter in the modern Hebrew, but it's early Hebrew that what we want to look at. It looks kind of like this outstretched, like the arm, and then like some fingers here for like a hand. Or that could be like the thumb here and then the fingers, or vice versa. Ayin is means to see, to shade, to watch, to experience. It also means salvation, or like a yoke, like hooking something together. The early Hebrew, it looks like an eyeball, like to watch, like an eye. Okay. So those are the 4 letters that make up Rakia. So yeah, pictures and eye. So now, while reading the meanings and order of the letters in the word, so we're talking about their meanings, and we're just going to read them straight across, or in this case from right to left. We're going to look at their word pictures. It's going to tell, it could tell this story. The firmament is the top of the earth where the sun is located to travel in a circle and light up the sky, which is how we tell time, which is a finished work of creation completed by his hand to see and watch his people. Now you're like, where'd you get that from? But I highlighted in bold the meanings of the words, and this is literally in order. Top, sun, circle, light, time, creation, hand, see, watch. So for top, you get Genesis 1, 6 through 8. It says, let there be a firmament in the midst of the heavens, let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament to the waters which were above the firmament. So that'd be the top of earth. Remember, it's like the footstool of God, so it's the top of earth. It said, and God called the firmament heaven, and the evening, morning, the second day. Then we have the sun. Genesis chapter 1, verses 14, 16. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from night, and let them be for signs, for seasons, and for days and years. And they put the lights in the firmament, and it was so. Then we talk about a circle. Psalm 19, 4 and 6. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. He has set a tabernacle for the sun, which is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoices like a strong man to run its race. Its rising is from one end of heaven, and its circuit is from to the other end, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. And then light. Daniel 12:3, it says, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and that they turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. And then time, you have Isaiah 38:8, behold, I will bring the shadow of the sundial, which has gone down with the sun on the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backwards. So the sun returned 10 degrees on the dial, but which had gone down. That's Hezekiah beginning his life extended. Then creation, Genesis chapter 1, 17 and 19. It says, God set them in the firmament of heavens to give light on the earth, rule over the day, and divide light from darkness, and it was good. Evening and morning the 4th day. Then with his hand, Isaiah 40:12 said, did any of you measure the ocean by yourself, or stretch out the sky with your own hands? Did you put soil the earth in a bucket, or weigh the hills and mountains on a balance scales? And then and then see and watch, Isaiah 40:21 and 22. Don't you know? Don't you hear? Haven't you been told from the start? Don't you know how the earth is set up? He who sits above the circle of the earth, for whom its inhabitants appear like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to live in. That's just the kind of the scriptural references there when I kind of put that together. I don't know, I just thought that was pretty cool. It just read in line just like that. What about this? Since God's language is very deep, and if we understand that the firmament is similar to the veil and the tabernacle, which is the dividing line between man and God, you could also interpret the word rakia as follows. The most important chief rests behind his created work, in which he is to be worshipped and experienced. Well, let's look at the scriptures for that. The most important chief, Psalm 97:9. For you, Lord, are the most high above all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods. Behind, Ezekiel 10:1. Then I looked, and behold, in the firmament there was above the head of the cherubims, there appeared over them as if it were a sapphire stone, as the appearance of the likeness of a throne. It's behind, from our perspective, the firmament, as well as just looking in the tabernacle, right? Created work, Genesis 1 through 6 through 8. Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Worshipped, Revelation 5:13. It says, and I heard every creature which is in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and such as in the sea, all of them saying, blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne and unto the Lamb forever and ever. So where are they worshiping at? Where are they worshiping him at? Where is he? He's on the throne. That's where he's to be worshipped and experienced. In Psalm 16:11 says, "Thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hands there are pleasures forevermore." Pretty darn cool, I think. I mean, you can look at that word rakia, break it down in its original Hebrew, and you can see that is it just a coincidence that you can take its letters and it means those things? I mean, I added a few words in there, but if you just take the bolded letters, the most important chief the most important chief behind created work, worshipped, experienced. It's like that's what those letters mean. And then how does that line up with all the scriptures that we've learned? And I just gave one example scripture. I mean, you could obviously fill those up, but we'd be here forever reading those. But I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool. I hope you enjoyed that. So I hope you're having fun. Hope you're enjoying yourself. We're almost through the series. So the next video that we have coming is a look at all the different worldviews of the ancient cultures and see how the firmament is involved in those. Now, most of those you could say are dispelled at this point, but it's interesting to see how that stacks up not only against the creation narrative and what we've been learning, but why do they all have a very similar cosmology? Like, where did that originate from? That's the question. Where did that originate from? So we're gonna have fun looking at some cosmologies of the past. See you guys in the next video.